At last, the girl told the powerful man that she had separated the ingredients of her beauty and stored them in pots. She also told him that he would enjoy those juices of beauty when the mundane poet man and when the poetic man asked to see these juices of beauty, he was directed to the store of loose stool and liquid vomit, which were emanating an unbeatably bad smell. Thus, the whole story of the beauty liquid was disclosed to him. Finally, by the grace of the saintly girl, this man of low character was able to distinguish between the shadow and the substance, and thus he came to his senses. This man's position was similarly to the position of every one of us who is attracted by false material beauty. The girl mentioned above had a beautifully developed material body in accordance with the desires of her mind, but in fact she was apart from that temporary material body and mind. She was in fact a spiritual spark, and so also was the lover who was attracted by her false skin. Mundane intellectuals and aesthetics, however, are deluded by the outward beauty and attraction of the relative truth and are unaware of the spiritual spark, which is both truth and beauty at the same time. The spiritual spark is so beautiful that when it leaves the so-called beautiful body, which in fact is full of stool and vomit, no one wants to touch that body, even if it is decorated with a costly costume. We are all pursuing false relative truth, which is incompatible with real beauty. The actual truth, however, is permanently beautiful, retaining the same standard of beauty for innumerable years. That spiritual spark is indestructible. The beauty of the outer skin can be destroyed in only a few hours merely by a dose of a strong purgative. But the beauty of truth is indestructible and always the same. Unfortunately, mundane artists and intellectuals are ignorant of this beautiful spark of spirit. They are also ignorant of the whole fire which is the source of these spiritual sparks, and they are ignorant of the relationships between the sparks and the fire, which take the form of transcendental pastimes. When those pastimes are displayed here by the grace of the Almighty Krishna, foolish people who cannot see beyond their senses confuse those pastimes of truth and beauty with the manifestations of loose stool and vomit described above. Thus, in despair, they ask how truth and beauty can be accommodated at the same time. Mundaners do not know that the whole spiritual entity is the beautiful person who attracts everything. They are unaware that he, or in other words, Krishna, is the prime substance, the prime source, and fountainhead of everything that be. The infinitesimal spiritual sparks, being parts and parcels of that whole spirit, are qualitatively the same in beauty and eternity. In other words, the living entities like you and me have all this possibility of beauty and eternity. However, if we become materialistically engaged and waste our time in sense gratification, we lose that special type of identification. The only difference is that the whole is eternally the whole and the parts are eternally the parts. Both of them, however, are the ultimate truth, ultimate beauty, ultimate knowledge, ultimate energy, ultimate renunciation, and ultimately opulence. Although written by the greatest mundane poet or intellectual, any literature which does not describe the ultimate truth and beauty is but a store of loose stool and vomit of the relative truth. Real literature is that which describes the ultimate truth and beauty of the absolute supreme personality of Godhead, Krishna. In other words, one second. In other words, okay, I lost my place. Okay. We are all pursuing a false relative truth, which is incompatible with real beauty. The actual truth, however, is permanently beautiful, retaining the same standard of beauty for innumerable years. That spiritual spark is indestructible. The beauty of the outer skin can be destroyed in only a few hours merely by a dose of a strong purgative. But the beauty of truth is indestructible and always the same. Unfortunately, mundane artists and intellectuals are ignorant of this beautiful spark of spirit. They are also ignorant of the whole fire which is the source of these spiritual sparks. And they are ignorant of the relationships between the sparks and the fire. Okay, so basically the fire means Krishna, the Supreme Personality Godhead. And the sparks are the living entities like you and me who are engaged in devotional service. When they are also ignorant of the whole fire which is the source of these spiritual sparks. And they are ignorant of the relationships between the sparks and the fire, which take the form of transcendental pastimes. When those pastimes are displayed here by the grace of the Almighty, meaning Krishna, foolish people who cannot see beyond their senses confuse those pastimes of truth and beauty with the manifestations of loose stool and vomit described above. Thus, in despair, they ask how truth and beauty can be accommodated at the same time. Mundaners do not know that the whole spiritual entity is the beautiful person who attracts everything. In other words, Krishna. They are unaware that he is the prime substance and the prime source and fountainhead of everything that be. The infinitesimal spiritual sparks, being parts and parcels of that whole spirit, are qualitatively the same in beauty and eternity. The only difference is that the whole is eternally the whole and the parts are eternally the parts. Both of them, however, are the ultimate truth, ultimate beauty, ultimate knowledge, ultimate energy, ultimate renunciation, and ultimate opulence. Although written by the greatest mundane poet or intellectual, any literature which does not describe the ultimate truth and beauty is but a storehouse of loose stool and vomit of the relative truth. Real literature is that which describes the ultimate truth and beauty of the absolute. Okay, so what does it mean when it says the absolute? It's talking about Krishna. And Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But each of us is part and parcel of Krishna. So we have the same potential of being eternal and going back to Godhead. If we are cheated by sense gratification and mundane activities, our spiritual potency is undermined, and we take birth and death continually. It's only when we give up nonsensical things and become serious about spiritual life, at that point, we're able to always chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, and engage in devotional service, or the type of service that makes us always in the in Krishna consciousness. That way, every day, from the time you wake up to the time you take rest, you're always thinking about Krishna, chanting the names of Krishna, glorifying Krishna, helping others understand Krishna, and so forth. That means that you're a real person. People who have no, let's say, relationship with Krishna, they are wasting their time and energy in this life. And they will be caught in the net of continual birth and death. However, those persons who take advantage of Krishna consciousness and engage in devotional service, chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, eating only Krishna prasadam, engaging in devotional service, and always helping others to understand Krishna, then you're a real person and you have a real life. Those persons who are not interested in Krishna, they're simply interested in eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, are like animals with no real knowledge of God. They're simply eating, sleeping, mating, and defending like an animal. It's only when we understand our relationship with Krishna and act in that relationship that we become real people. And we have a chance to be liberated from the cycle of birth and death. The animals cannot be free from birth and death. They have to wait till they come to the human form. And in the human form, if they don't act properly, they go back to being animals. So it's a very rare thing to become liberated from the cycle of birth and death. One must become very serious to practice Krishna consciousness. Then we can engage wholeheartedly in devotional service to the Lord and help others also to understand their relationship with Krishna. And then you can easily go back to Godhead. But if we're overwhelmed by meat eating, gambling, illicit sex, intoxication, talking nonsense, and being mundane all the time, we'll just keep going over and over again, birth, death, old age, and disease, until sometime that we might come in contact with genuine devotees and wake up from our slumber of ignorance. So here it says, a small child walking with his father goes on inquiring constantly. He asks his father so many odd things, and the father has to satisfy him with proper answers. When I was a young father in my householder life, I was overflooded with hundreds of questions from my second son, who was my constant companion. One day, it so happened that a bridegroom's party was passing our tram car, and a 4-year-old boy, as usual, inquired what the big procession was. He was given all possible answers to his 1,001 questions regarding the marriage party, and finally he asked whether his own father was married. This question gave rise to loud laughter from all the elderly gentlemen present. Although the boy was perplexed as to why they were laughing, anyway, the boy was somehow satisfied by his married father. The lesson from this incident is that since a human being is a rational animal, he is born to make inquiries. The greater the number of questions, the greater the advancement of knowledge and science. The whole of material civilization is based on this originally large volume of questions put by young men to their elders. When elderly persons give the proper answers to the questions of the youngsters, civilization makes progress, one step after another. The most intelligent man, however, inquires about what happens after death. The less intelligent make lesser inquiries, but the questions of those who are more intelligent go higher and still higher. Among the most intelligent of men was Maharaj Parikshit, the great king of the entire world, who was accidentally cursed by a Brahmana to meet death from the bite of a serpent within 7 days. The Brahmana who cursed him was only a boy, yet he was very powerful, and because he did not know the importance of the great king, the boy foolishly cursed him to meet death within 7 days. This was later lamented by the boy's father, whom the king had offended. When the king was informed of the unfortunate curse, he at once left his palatial home and went to the bank of the Ganges, which was near his capital, to prepare for his impending death. Because he was a great king, almost all the great sages and learned scholars assembled at that place, where the king was fasting prior to leaving his mortal body. At last, Sukadeva Goswami, the youngest contemporary saint, also arrived there, and he was unanimously accepted to preside at that meeting, although his great father was also present. The king respectfully offered Sukadeva Goswami the principal seat of esteem and asked him relevant questions regarding the king's passing from the mortal world, which was to take place on the 7th day, there henceforth. The great king was a worthy descendant of the Pandavas, who were all great devotees, placed the following relevant inquiries before the great sage Sukadeva. My dear sir, you are the greatest of the great transcendentalists, and therefore I submissively beg to ask you about my duties at this moment. I am just on the verge of my death. Therefore, what should I do at this critical hour? Please tell me, my Lord, what should I hear, what should I worship, or whom should I remember now? A great sage like you does not stay at the home of a householder more than necessary, and therefore it is my good fortune that you have kindly come here at the time of my death. Please, therefore, give me your directions at this critical hour. The great sage, having thus been pleasantly requested by the king, answered his questions authoritatively, for the sage was a great transcendental scholar and was also well equipped with godly qualities, since he was the worthy son of Badarayana, or Vyasadeva, the original compiler of the Vedic literature. Sukadeva Goswami said, my dear king, your inquiry is very much relevant, and it is also beneficial for all people of all times. Such inquiries, which are the highest of all, are relevant because they are confirmed by the teachings of the Vedanta Darshana, the conclusion of the Vedic knowledge, and are Atmavit Samata. In other words, liberated souls who have full knowledge of the spiritual identity put forward such relevant inquiries in order to elucidate further information about the transcendence. The Srimad Bhagavatam is the natural commentary upon the great Vedanta for Sariraka Sutras, which were compiled by Srila Vyasadeva. The Vedanta Sutras are the topmost Vedic literature, and they contain the nucleus of basic inquiries about the transcendental subject of spiritual knowledge. Yet, although Srila Vyasadeva compiled this great treatise, his mind was not satisfied. Then he happened to meet Sri Narada, his spiritual master, who advised him to describe the identity of the personality of Godhead. Upon receiving this advice, Vyasadeva meditated on the principle of Bhakti Yoga, which showed him distinctly what is the absolute and what is the relativity, or Maya. Having achieved perfect realization of these facts, he compiled the great narration of the Srimad Bhagavatam, or Beautiful Bhagavatam, which begins with actual historical facts concerning the life of Maharaj Parikshit. The Vedanta Sutra begins with the key inquiry about the transcendence, Atato Brahma Jigyasa. One should now inquire about Brahman, or the transcendence. As long as a man is in full vigor of life, he forgets the naked truth of death, which he has to meet. Thus a foolish man makes no relevant inquiry about the real problems of life. Everyone thinks that he will never die, although he sees evidence of death before his eyes at every second. Here is the distinction between animalism and humanity. An animal, like a goat, has no sense of its impending death, although its brother goat is being slaughtered. The goat, being allured by the green grass offered to it, will stand peacefully waiting to be slaughtered next. On the other hand, if a human being sees his fellow man being killed by an enemy, he either fights to save his brother or leaves, if possible, to save his own life. That is the difference between a man and a goat. An intelligent man knows that death is born along with his own birth. He knows that he is dying at every second and that the final touch will be given as soon as his term of life is finished. He therefore prepares himself for the next life or for liberation from the disease of repeated birth and death. A foolish man, however, does not know that this human form of life is obtained after a series of births and deaths imposed in the past by the laws of nature. He does not know that a living entity is an eternal being who has no birth and death. Birth, death, old age, and disease are external impositions on the living entity and are due to his constant and in his contact with material nature and to his forgetfulness of his eternal godly nature and qualitative oneness with the absolute whole or truth. Human life provides the opportunity to know this eternal fact of or truth. Thus, the very beginning of the Vedanta Sutra advises that because we have this valuable form of human life, it is our duty now to inquire, what is Brahman? What is the absolute truth? A man who is not intelligent enough does not inquire about this transcendental life. Instead, he inquires about many irrelevant matters which do not concern his eternal existence. From the very beginning of his life, he inquires from his mother, father, teachers, professors, books, and so many other sources, but he does not have the right type of information about his real life. As mentioned before, Parikshit Maharaj was given a warning notice that he would meet death within 7 days, and he at once left his palace to prepare himself for the next stage, in other words, his imminent death. The king had at least 7 days at his disposal in which to prepare for death. But as far as we are concerned, although at least we know that our death is sure, we have no information of the date fixed for the occurrence. I do not know whether I am going to meet death at the next moment. Even such a great man as Mahatma Gandhi could not calculate that he was going to meet with death in the next 5 minutes, nor could his great associates guess his impending death. Nonetheless, all such gentlemen present themselves are great leaders of the people. It is ignorance of death and life that distinguishes an animal from a man. A man, in the real sense of the term, inquires about himself and what he is, wherefrom he has come into this life, and where is he going after death. Why is he put under the troubles of threefold miseries, although he does not want them? Beginning from one's childhood, one goes on inquiring about so many things in his life, but he never inquires about the real essence of life. This is animalism. There is no difference between a man and an animal as far as the 4 principles of animal life are concerned. For every living being exists by eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating, but only the human life is meant for relevant inquiries into the facts about eternal life and the transcendence. Human life is therefore meant for research into eternal life. And the Vedanta Sutra advises one to conduct this research now or never. If one fails to inquire now into these relevant matters about life, one is sure to go back again into the animal kingdom by the laws of nature. Therefore, even if a foolish man appears advanced in material science, that is, in eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating, and so on, he cannot get free from the cruel hands of death by the law of nature. The law of nature works under three modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. Those who live under the conditions of goodness are promoted to the higher spiritual status of life, and those who live under the conditions of passion remain stationed in the same place in the material world where they are now. But those who live under the conditions of ignorance are sure to be degraded to the lower species, in other words, animals. The modern setup of human civilization is a risky one because it offers no education about relevant inquiries into the essential principles of life. Okay, so in simple English, that means that today people are so involved in eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, and engaging in mundane knowledge, that they're not actually educated. They're not even asking questions about relevant questions about the essential principles of life. Like animals, people do not know that they are going to be slaughtered by the laws of nature. They are satisfied with a bunch of green grass or a so-called jolly life, like the waiting goat in a slaughterhouse. Considering such a condition of human life, we are just trying to make a humble attempt to save the human being by the message of back to Godhead. This method is not fictitious. If there is at all to be an era of reality, this message of back to Godhead is the beginning of that era. In other words, beginning of the time where there's going to be genuine questions asked by people, and following those questions, they will become involved in devotional service. According to Sri Sukadeva Goswami, the real fact is that a Grihamedi, or a person who has tried himself, like the goat meant for slaughter, in the business of family, society, community, nation, or humanity at large in regard to the problems and necessities of animal life, namely eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating, and who has no knowledge of the transcendence, is no better than an animal. He may have inquired about physical, political, economic, cultural, educational, or similar other matters of temporary material concern. But if he has not inquired about the principles of transcendental life, he should be regarded as a blind man driven ahead by uncontrolled senses and about to fall into a ditch. That is the description of the Grihamedi. The opposite of the Grihamedi, however, is the Grihasta. The Grihasta ashrama, or the shelter of spiritual family life, is as good as the life of a sannyasi, a member of the renounced order, regardless of whether one is a householder or renunciate. The important point is that of relevant inquiries. In other words, asking real questions. That's why, every time I give a lecture, I say, okay, are there any questions? And nobody raises their hand. And here it's saying that whether one is a householder or a renunciate, the important point is that of relevant inquiries, meaning real questions. A sannyasi is bogus if not interested in the relevant inquiries, and a grihasta or householder is bona fide if he is inclined to put forward such inquiries. The Grihamedi, however, is simply interested in the animal propensities of life. By the laws of nature, the Grihamedi's life is full of calamities, whereas the life of the Grihasta is full of happiness. But in the modern human civilization, the Grihamedis are posing as Grihastas. We should therefore know who is what. A Grihamedi's life is full of vices because he does not know how to live a spiritual family life. He does not know that beyond his control is a power who supervises and controls his activities, and he has no conception of his future life. The Grihamedi is blind to his future and has no aptitude for making relevant inquiries. Doesn't ask any questions. His only qualification is that he is bound by the shackles of attachment to the false things he has contacted in his temporary existence. At night, such Grihamedis waste their valuable time by sleeping or by satisfying their different varieties of sexual urges, by visiting cinema shows and attending clubs and gambling houses where women and liquor are indulged in lavishly. And during the day, they waste their valuable time in accumulating money, or, if they have sufficient money, to spend by adjusting the comforts of their family members. Their standard of living and their personal needs increase with their increase in monetary income. Thus, there is no limit to their expenses, and they are never satiated, never satisfied. Consequently, there is unlimited competition in the field of economic development, and therefore there is no peace in any society of the human world. Everyone is perplexed by the same questions about earning and spending, but ultimately one must depend on the mercy of Mother Nature. When there is a scarcity in production and there is disturbances caused by providence, the poor plan-making politician blames it on cruel nature, but carefully avoids studying how and by whom the laws of nature are controlled. The Bhagavad Gita, however, explains that the laws of nature are controlled by the absolute personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. God alone is the controller of nature and the natural laws. Ambitious materialists sometimes examine a fragment of the law of nature, but they never care to know the maker of these laws. Most of them do not believe in the existence of an absolute person or God who controls the laws of nature. Rather, they simply concern themselves with the principles by which different elements interact, but they make no reference to the ultimate direction which makes such interactions possible. They have no relevant questions or answers in this regard. The second of the Vedanta Sutras, however, answers the essential question about Brahman by asserting that the Supreme Brahman, the Supreme Transcendence, is he from whom everything is generated. Ultimately, he is the Supreme Person. Not only is the foolish Grihamedi ignorant of the temporary nature of the particular type of body he has obtained, but he is also blind to the actual nature of what is happening before him in the daily affairs of his life. He may see his father die, his mother die, or a relative or neighbor die, yet he does not make the relevant inquiries about whether or not the other existing members of his family will die. Sometimes he thinks and knows that all the members of his family will die today or tomorrow, and that he will also die. He may know that the whole family show or that matter, the whole show, community, society, nation, and all such things, is but a temporary bubble in the air having no permanent value. Yet he is mad after temporary arrangements and does not concern himself with any relevant inquiries. Yeah, not asking any questions about what happens when you die. Is there life after death, etc.? They're not asking any questions. He has no knowledge as where he has to go after his death. He works very hard for the temporary arrangements of his family, society, or nation, but he never makes any future arrangements either for himself or for others who will pass away from the present phase of life. In a public vehicle, like a railway carriage, we meet and sit down together with some unknown friends and become members of the same vehicle for a short time, but in due course we separate, never to meet again. Similarly, in the long sojourn of life, we get a temporary sitting accommodation in a so-called family, country, or society. But when the time is up, we are unwillingly separated from one another and never to meet again. There are so many questions relevant to our temporary arrangements in life and our friends in these temporary arrangements, but a man who is a Grihamedi never inquires about things of a permanent nature. We are all busy making permanent plans in various degrees of leadership without knowing the permanent nature of things as they are. Shripad Sankaracharya, who especially strove to remove this ignorance in society and who advanced the cult of spiritual knowledge in regard to the all-pervading impersonal Brahman, said in despair, "Children are engaged in playing, young boys are engaged in so-called love affairs with young girls, and the old are seriously thoughtful about adjusting a baffled life of struggle. But alas, no one is prepared to inquire relevantly into the science of Brahman, the absolute truth." Sri Sukadeva Goswami, who was asked for direction by Maharaj Pariksit, responded to the king's relevant inquiries by advising him as follows: Tasmat Bharata Sarvatra Bhagavan Ishvaro Hari Srotavyas Kirtitavyascha Smartavyas Chechat Abhayam. O descendant of Bharata, it is the duty of mortal men to inquire about, hear about, glorify, and meditate upon the personality of Godhead, who is the most attractive person because of his fullness in opulence. He is called Hari because he alone can undo the conditioned existence of a living being. If we at all want to be freed from conditional existence, we must make relevant inquiries about the absolute truth so that he may be pleased to bestow upon us perfect freedom in life. Okay, basically it's saying, if we don't ask questions, we're not going to make any advancement spiritually. Yes. Yes. Haribo, Haribo. Yeah.
Many times we ask, like, is it bad to give up material desires? Shouldn't we have material desires? So how should we answer them according to their level, like their level of understanding?
Well, it's very simple. If I have material desire to find some woman to have sex, that's completely wrong. But if I have material desires to make tangible spiritual advancement, that's okay. So it all depends on what you want. Do you want to have a life of spiritual existence, always chanting, dancing, feasting, hearing lectures, giving lectures? That means you're having a spiritual life. On the other hand, if you're only thinking about eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, you're wasting your life. And you will feel really sorry at the moment of death because you'll be confused and you don't know what's going to happen to you. On the other hand, if we're always chanting, dancing, feasting, and hearing lectures, giving lectures, and having nice prasadam and so forth, at the moment of death, we're not confused because Krishna was going to come and take us back to Godhead because we have spent our life worshiping the Lord. You can spend your whole life making money. At the moment of death, you're going to be scared and completely confused about what's going to happen next to you. But if you spend your whole life chanting Hare Krishna, you're not going to be confused. You're not going to be afraid. In fact, you're going to be happy because the moment of death for a devotee is the best moment because they're going to see Krishna and go back to Godhead. You see? So the devotee is not afraid of the moment of death, just as long as he's engaged in genuine devotional service. The moment of death is actually the best moment for the devotee because he's going to see Krishna and go back to Godhead. But the moment of death for the materialists is the worst moment because they're going to see Yamaraj. Yamaraj has, well, let's put it like this. Where he is very hot. Really hot. Okay. Any other questions? Of what? Of what? You're scared of death. You shouldn't be scared of death because you have an eternal soul, which means you're never going to die. It's only your body that's dying. But your body has died many times already. You say, your body is always dying. So you shouldn't be afraid because you have an eternal soul. That means that even though you get old, and when you die, you're going to get another body. And you're going to have another chance to make spiritual advancement. Or you're already ready, you're already qualified to go back to Godhead in this lifetime. So you can't be a loser in Krishna consciousness. Let's put it like that. You can't be a loser. Because Krishna will always be on your side because you have a serious interest in Krishna consciousness. Hearing, chanting, feasting, preaching, etc. So your eternal life is guaranteed. Now, people who are demons, who just eat, sleep, mate, and defend, who are sex maniacs, this and that, they're also going to live. And they also are eternal. But their life is miserable. And they're all thinking that, look, I'll do whatever I want. And then when I die, there's not going to be anything. What they don't know is that when they die, they don't really die. They go to hell. And that's not a nice place. And they're going to suffer like anything. And eventually, after suffering for a long period of time, they'll be given another chance to correct themselves. So, you see, the materialists, they think, look, I'm going to do whatever I want. And I'll live life to its absolute nature. And when I die, there's nothing. But that's not true. When people like that die, they learn that there is life after death. And there is consequences for all the nonsense things they did. And now they're going to pay back all that nonsense, all the nonsense things that they did. So they never actually die. People don't know anything about nature. The body, the body will die, but the soul will never die. But the soul will suffer terribly because of sinful activities. And if you become serious and giving up all nonsense things and taking life seriously by chanting Hare Krishna and so forth, then at the moment of death, you have nothing to fear. You won't feel scared or in any way intimidated because you know that you're going to see Krishna and go back to Godhead. Yeah, the people that have no faith in God, they don't spare the time to understand what is spiritual life. They're just living in a bubble of ignorance. And when they die, they go into the animal kingdom. And they'll have to go through many, many, many lives to come back to the human form. And again, when they come back to the human form, they might make the same mistakes again because they're adamant not to surrender. So, but someone who, like, let's say someone is here for the first time and they hear this, if they understand by surrendering to Krishna, that'll solve all their problems. Let's say someone comes here for the first time And we have this discussion, and they realize that by surrendering to Krishna, all their problems will go away, and they will have real eternal life. That's the greatest, let's say, the greatest possibility of a human being. So, we should speak about these things. We should ask the question, what happens after you die? We should ask that question. We know what happens. We can answer that question. Most other people, they can't answer that question. Even great philosophers, they can't answer that question. But we can answer that question. We know what's going to happen. We know that the soul is eternal. And we know that a person who doesn't take seriously this life, they're going to unnecessarily suffer. Life after life, making the same mistakes in this life, the next life, the next life, the next life, until they wake up and begin to hear Bhagavad Gita spoken by genuine devotees. Then they have a chance to finish this terrible cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease and go back to Godhead where they have eternal life. You never really die. See, materialistic people, they think, well, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. When I die, there's nothing. No, that's not true. Many people, there's some people that, they commit they do so many bad things, and then they commit suicide thinking that by killing themselves, there's going to be nothing. And they're going to be shocked to see what happens when they kill themselves. They're going to go to hell and suffer like anything, because you can never kill the soul. You can kill the body, but you can't kill the soul. So, what you would say, suicide is not a solution to problems. People commit suicide because they don't want to be a person anymore. They want to go into oblivion. But that's not what happens when you commit suicide. When you commit suicide, you go to a very horrible place and suffer terribly. It's not that you go somewhere and that's the end of life. No. You cannot kill the soul. You have an eternal soul. Everyone has an eternal soul. Therefore, if you take care of your soul, you can go back to Godhead. If you abuse your soul, you're still going to live, but you're going to be very, very troubled by lust, anger, and greed, and suffer terribly. Why go there? It's much easier to chant Hare Krishna and be happy. Say, Haribol. Okay, so I think we'll stop right there unless there are other questions. Yeah, today we heard some really interesting things. I mean, it's amazing what Prabhupada has written here. Not only is the foolish Grihamedi ignorant of the temporary nature of the particular type of body he has obtained, but he is also blind to the actual nature of what is happening before him in the daily affairs of his life. He may see his father die, his mother die, or a relative or neighbor die, yet he does not make the relevant inquiries about whether or not the other existing members of his family will die. Sometimes he thinks and knows that all the members of his family will die today or tomorrow, and that he also will die. He may know that the whole family show or for that or for that matter, the whole show of community, society, nation, and all such things is but a temporary bubble in the air, having no permanent value. Yet he is mad after such temporary arrangements and does not concern himself with any relevant inquiries. Doesn't ask any questions. He's seeing different members of his family dying. He's seeing, tsunamis and earthquakes and things like that. But he's not asking the question, why are these things happening? And how can I make a solution of all this misery? They're not really asking any questions. And therefore it says, he has no knowledge as to where he has to go after his death. He works very hard for the temporary arrangements of his family, society, or nation, but he never makes any future arrangements, either for himself or for others who will pass away from this present phase of life. In a public vehicle like a railway carriage, we meet and sit down together with some unknown friends and become members of the same vehicle for a short time. But in due course, we separate, never to meet again. Similarly, in a long sojourn of life, we get a temporary sitting accommodation in a so-called family, country, or society. But when the time is up, we are unwillingly separated from one another, never to meet again. There are so many questions relevant to our temporary arrangements in life and our friends in these temporary arrangements. But a man who is a Grihamedi never inquires. See that? Never asks a question. There are many questions, relevant questions, to our temporary arrangements in life and our friends in these temporary arrangements. But a man who is a Grihamedi never asks questions about things of a permanent nature. We are all busy making permanent plans in various degrees of leadership without knowing the permanent nature of things as they are. Sripad Sankaracharya, who especially strove to remove this ignorance in society and who advocated the cult of spiritual knowledge in regard to the all-pervading impersonal Brahman, said in despair, "Children are engaged in playing, young boys are engaged in so-called love affairs with young girls, and the old are seriously thoughtful about adjusting a baffled life of struggle. But alas, no one is prepared to inquire relatively into the science of Brahman, the absolute truth." Sri Sukadeva Goswami, who was asked for direction by Maharaj Parikshit, responded to the king's relevant inquiries by advising him as follows: "O descendant of Bharata, it is the duty of mortal men to inquire about, hear about, glorify, and meditate upon the personality of Godhead, who is the most attractive person because of his fullness in opulence. He is called Hari because he alone can undo the conditioned existence of a living being. If we at all want to be freed from the conditioned existence, we must make relevant inquiries about the absolute truth so that he," meaning Krishna, "may be pleased to bestow upon us perfect freedom in life." Wow, that's our takeaway for today. That's profound, very, very profound. O descendant of Bharata, it is the duty of mortal men to inquire about, hear about, glorify, and meditate upon the personality of Godhead, who is the most attractive person because of his fullness in opulence. He is called Hari because he alone can undo the conditioned existence of a living being. If we at all want to be freed from the conditioned existence, we must make relevant inquiries about the absolute truth, so that he, meaning Krishna, may be pleased to bestow upon us perfect freedom in life. That is so spiritually relevant, what we just heard. One paragraph, but it's so relevant. You should meditate on it. And I'll read it one more time. Tasmat Bharata Sarvatma Bhagavan Ishwaro Hari Shrotavya Kirtitavyascha Smartavyas Chichat Abhayam. O descendant of Bharata, it is the duty of mortal men to inquire about, hear about, glorify, and meditate upon the personality of Godhead, who is the most attractive person because of his fullness in opulence. He is called Hari because he alone can undo the conditioned existence of a living being. If we at all want to be freed from the conditioned existence, we must make relevant inquiries about the absolute truth, so that he, or Krishna, may be pleased to bestow upon us perfect freedom in life. Wow, we should make a big sign here and a poster, yeah. It is so profound. And actually, we should have so many questions to ask when you hear something like this. There should be so many questions. And the ultimate question is, what's going to happen to us after we die? You see? Okay, so if somebody wants to make a poster. Here it is right here. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai. There's nobody like Prabhupada. Where else are you going to hear this? Nobody's going to say this.
Freedom from the fear of death problem, right? That is freedom. Right? You can expand it to so many things.
Yeah.
I'll take a print out of it.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Are there any questions? Oh, silence. What? Well, there's no reason to be scared of death because you have an eternal soul. I know so many people that say that.
So there are two types of people, right? One is people who don't think about death, they're not scared.
Because they're ignorant.
Exactly. And there are people who know what is going to actually happen at the end of the death, and that's why they're not scared. And then the third category is the people who, are afraid because
They know that they've done so many sins, they're going to really suffer. Yeah. Well, I never say that, I'm not afraid of death. I'm afraid of ignorance. That's what I'm afraid of. But we should definitely be Krishna conscious. Then we can live very, let's say, happily in this world, knowing very well that we have eternal soul. And that we're not going to really die. Yeah, this body is going to die, but we're not going to die. And after the body dies, in uh, seven, what is it? Huh? No, 7 months.
7 months. Oh,
Yeah, we'll get another body.
7 years. 7 years.
No, not 7 years. Not 7 days either.
As I was told, every 7 years, I think every cell in the body.
That's different. That's
Who
different.
gets the body in 7 months? That's what
Oh,
Maharaj
okay.
Like when we die.
Yeah, yeah. Within 7 months after. Yeah.
What happens in the 7 months?
You go through the preparation for the next body. That's where.
Yeah, like for example, let's say you've been very, very sinful, right?
Let's take the other example.
No, wait a minute, no. Let's say you've been very sinful. So you die, and after 7 months, you've been trained to eat stool.
Come back as a pig.
Yeah. It took that long to make you feel comfortable eating stool.
This is the exact reason I always say, let's take the other example.
So we have to be very careful, I mean, we might laugh at these things, but this is what happens to people who don't have any knowledge, spiritual knowledge. And they end up, see, everybody, all these so-called people are hoping that when they die, there's nothing. But that's not true. There is plenty of things that are going to happen after they die. And they're not going to be, let's say, free from suffering when they die. So it depends on what our situation is. If our situation is being Krishna conscious, then you can die and go back to the spiritual world where there's no suffering. But if you are a karmi, a materialist, and you think, well, when I die, I'll take birth again, and I'll continue to live. I heard that in a class, that the soul is eternal. So I'll do all kinds of nonsense and die, but then I'll still be, have another body, right? But that body could be the body of an ant, not a human being. That's what they're not thinking about, So we have to be very, very careful not to, let's say, do something stupid. The dumbest thing we can do is to ignore Krishna consciousness. That's the dumbest thing you can do.
Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says, Kalosmi, I am time, I am death also. He comes as death.
Yeah.
Mrityu sarvarascha. So when Krishna comes as death, and like, we are Krishna's devotees, but when Krishna comes as death, I mean, and we are fearful of death, and it's kind of how to handle that situation.
So there is
We are worshipping Krishna, and Krishna himself is coming as death to us. It may be scary at the same time.
No,
The person himself is coming to
It's only
You probably know this example. Whereas, right, there is an example of a cat
yeah.
holding the kitten versus a cat holding the mouse. So when the cat is holding the kitten is happy that the mother is holding. Whereas the cat is holding the mouse is like dead
it's
scared.
death. It's death. Yeah.
So do you want to be the mouse or do you want to be the cat is your choice. Our choice.
So we have to become more lovable to Krishna, right? That is the goal. Like more Krishna consciousness so that we are more lovable.
Look, it's much easier to be Krishna conscious than to be a materialist. Materialistic life is terrible, but Krishna conscious life is wonderful. So there's nothing wrong with having a spiritual life. It's happiness, it's full of happiness. And then when death comes, you're not going to really die. You're going to go back to Godhead.
There's one more question.
Yes, yes, yes.
So if we're in Krishna consciousness and we die, it's said that 21 generations get liberated, 10 ahead and 10 behind and 1 yours. I was just wondering, so what if some of those ancestors have already reincarnated as someone else or whatever? How does that liberate them? And then one more question I had on the same point is, we've had so many fathers and mothers over different, so many lifetimes. Is it just in this life the ancestors that we've had are they the ones that get liberated, or I'm just curious.
Good question.
Well, the ancestors, right? They're not going to be there eternally. Let's see. Just like yourself, when you die, you will wait for, let's say, 7 months, and then you get another body. And that body is going to depend on your consciousness. You might have led a very bad life, and therefore you're not going to get a human body. You're going to get an animal body. And then you're going to get stuck in that animal body for many lifetimes. So,
At that time, Maharaj, if let's say her daughter becomes pure devotee,
yeah,
Let's hope so.
yeah.
so
And I'm a pig, for example. Will that liberate?
so that's the question. Because her daughter now is a pure devotee.
Yeah,
So because of the promise that Krishna gives, that
yeah,
he's
but
not going
she's only like 2 years old.
I know, but let's say
She grows up.
when she grows up,
Yeah, and at her time.
Well, you're going to have to wait for her to grow up.
yeah. But at that time, let's say if she is a pure devotee, but in this lifetime, then 21 generations include, her, but in a different body. So she will also get a chance to liberate. Is that that's the question?
She's not. She's not. She will not be your daughter, your child. She will be going her own way, and you'll be going to another way.
But the question is like the promise that you will get ancestors liberated. So because even though she is moving on, because she will be her ancestor, right, Maharaj, like as a parent. So will she not get the benefit of getting liberated?
Maybe. It all depends on the. It depends on a lot of different things. But the main thing is, we should make this the last time that we take a birth. And that can only happen if we use this time that we have to be in Krishna consciousness. If we use the time that we have in Krishna consciousness, this could be our last time in the material world. And we go back to Godhead.
We don't pass the buck. We perfect our life. That's the main.
Well, yeah, that's the perfection of life. You go back to Godhead, right? So you prepare yourself for that by hearing Bhagavad Gita and discussing these things. Right. Okay, so Hare Krishna.